Hello, everyone. So my name is Enrico Cimitan, and with my colleague
Ayrton, Massey.
we're going to present the last part of this demo. It's going to be Empower Citizen. Well, you know the title. It's basically the part about native connector and the web client integration with Power Platform. So how my presentation is going to start is with some connector capabilities. So I have some introduction on something that you probably might or might not know, some announcements, and then I'll go with some demo on how our connector works and which capabilities it has. Let's start with the elephant in the room. That's a question we always get. Does this work with on-premise? So all new features and everything that me and my colleague are going to present are only for Business Central Online. We still have the on-premise connector, which we still support, of course, but that's still in preview, and the new features are not going to hit that connector. Another question we get very often is, what about license? Well, the Business Central connector requires you to have a premium license for Dataverse or Power Apps, Power Automate. The good news is, whenever you have a Business Central paid license, you also get the Dataverse license included, so that's good. If you need a trial or demo, so you don't have a Business Central paid license, you can still have a trial, and that should be enough for your demos. Now, as you might know, a few months ago, we actually removed the preview flag from the native connector, so now it's officially GA. That means we fully support it, and we're going to continue investments in the connector. I'll jump to my demo. And now I'm going to show you some capabilities for our connector. So I want to start to talk about the approvals. So you might know that we have the capability of connecting to the approval system in Business Central. So what's going to happen is, for example, in a purchase order, you have a request approval buttons here. And what you can do is you can create a new Power Automate flow. The moment you save it, this button is going to become enabled in Business Central. So you can start a workflow in Business Central that calls into Power Automate and then calls back into Business Central to approve the item. So I'll show you the first flow, which I already made in interest of time. So this is based on a template. We have templates for approvals for limited set of records at the moment for Business Central. So for example, purchase orders or customers or vendors and similar. And they all start with a trigger that is called when a asterisk approval is requested. In my case, it's a purchase document. So you can see here I have all my filters on, of course, the environment and company. And then I'm going to get the record. And I want to focus your attention on this step. You might know it already. It's start an approval. This starts an approval on the Dataverse side. What does it mean? It means there's going to be an approval which your users can reach from all kinds of different products within Microsoft. For example, they can approve from here. You see there's an approval section in Power Automate. But they can also reach the approvals from within Teams. So if they install the approvals app, they can just go into that and just do the approval immediately from within Teams. It's very well integrated with most Microsoft products. And again, the moment you create this flow, it's going to integrate well with Business Central as well. So that's the first type of flow you can create. The second type is an automated flow that runs whenever a record is created or modified or deleted in Business Central. So the moment you use one of our triggers, when a record is created, modified, or deleted, then we're going to basically create a webhook subscription in Business Central that is going to call back to Power Automate and start this flow. Then you need to get the full record, because then you get the latest version of whichever data you need, and you can use it for one of the 600 plus connectors. So last time I demoed anything regarding Power Platform, it was like 400 plus. Now it's 600 plus. So you're getting more and more integrated, first-party Microsoft products and also external products that you can connect to your flows. In my example, I'm not going to do the boring demo thing. So I'm just going to send an email to the customer email that I'm getting from the previous step. In my example, it's just welcome to Contoso. Please confirm your data. But of course, you can use everything coming from the previous steps and from any other connector you can use. I'm not going to show you this working in the interest of time, because we are running a bit over time and we need to leave some space for Q&A. So I want to mention right now, you're seeing a lot of triggers and such, so you might ask yourselves, where can I find documentation for all of these? We have actually two types of documentation. So if you search here in the connector section in Power Automate, you'll find the first documentation. And this is basically a list of all the capabilities, all the actions and triggers we have for our connector. And the second part is within the Business Central documentation instead. So you can go to aka.ms/BC automate. I'm going to have that in a slide later as well, so that it's recorded whenever this recording gets out. And there you'll find actually the explanation of how it integrates with Business Central and what you can do with Business Central and Power Automate combined. I want to focus your attention for the last bit of my demo on one action in particular, which we have improved and we are going to improve as well in the future. That's the Find Records action. I would say it's the most powerful one we have because it allows you to set a whole lot of different capabilities that are basically OData capabilities. So you can set, for example, the order by whenever you get, in my case, the list of sales invoices. So you can get them ordered by posting date or whatever else you need. And you can also have a top and skip. So if you're familiar with the data, this means basically you get only the first 10 records, and then you, I don't know, first skip the first record because you know already what it is. Or I don't know what your implementation might be, but you have the full power of a data like order, top, and skip, and also the full power of a data filter query. So here, for example, in my example flow, every Monday I'm getting all the invoices posted in the last week. And this you can achieve by using a data filter. So the connector supports basically every filter that Business Central supports. You might know that there are some weird limitations if you do cross-column filters in the NST. We have the same limitation on the connector, of course, but other than that, you can just use the full power of filter queries for Business Central. So in my example, I'm just getting all these sales invoices and then posting a message on Teams. But of course, you might integrate with some other product or service. So for the filter query, we don't have any help in how you fill in the query. So of course, if you want to see the available fields, you just jump into the Business Central documentation from API v2, and then you find all the fields you can use. All of these is, of course, supported also for custom APIs. So here you see that I chose API category v2.0, but I have a few Contoso APIs that I published to my tenant. If you have a custom API, you can use it. And if you want to create a custom API, we have docs on that as well, so you can find them on the Business Central docs. Last thing I want to show you, still regarding the Find Records action, is that we added a few. So first of all, we added a new capability, which is what we call paging. So until today, you will see here, it says maximum 1,000 records. That was true until these days. We've actually relaxed that. I need to change the documentation in the coming weeks. But now you can get more records. You just need to go to the settings here, and then you can activate pagination. So that means basically we're going to follow the links in the Business Central data and get as many records as you need. So until today it was up to 1,000. Today you can go to 100,000. The reason you cannot do more is not Business Central, it's just because Power Automate doesn't want to do too many calls. So at that point it gives you a hard stop of 100,001. So that's regarding the pagination. And the other thing I want to show you is that a question we get very often is, okay, but here I have to specify my environment name and company statically. Can I do that dynamically? The answer is, in short, yes, you can. And the way you do it is you need to create your flow first for one environment and company. And then you can just have a custom value here and just get some output from your previous steps or have it dynamic. The reason you need to set up the flow for one of them first is because we need to download the metadata. So we need to know which APIs to use and which metadata, which environment the metadata comes from. The other gotcha is that you need to use the company GUID because behind the scenes we resolve the company using the GUID. But if you do that, then you can have it working. And very last thing, the other thing you can do using the Find Records action is you can get related records. So in my example, I can get all the sales invoice lines, for example, for an invoice. And you can do that using the filter query. So here I'm filtering on the document ID, and then I'm getting all the lines. And again, I won't show you this working just because I want to jump to the Q&A and have some time for that. Good, so that's the end of my demo. I want to leave you with some teasers. What are we cooking for the coming months? So we are already working on supporting images and attachments for Power Apps and Power Automate, so that's coming very soon. Right now, that's one of the hard limitations we have. It just doesn't work if you try. And the other thing is that I showed you we have support for related records in Power Automate by using the Find Records action. That's a bit unintuitive because, of course, you need to know what to filter on to get the related record and all of that. We plan to have a better story for that coming very soon. as I mentioned earlier, more information in aka.ms/bcautomate in the Power Automate docs for the connector, or you can jump to aka.ms/bcyammer. If you're already on Yammer, you might know there's a community of partners working with the Power Automate and Power Apps connectors, and there's a lot of questions and answers, and basically you can talk to your peers and figure out. So I'll pass to Ayrton, and you can go with your demo.
Cool. Yeah, so Enrico showed us some fantastic improvements on the Power Platform side, but now it's time to talk about bringing that into Business Central, right? So you may remember that in May, we shipped the Power Automate Instant Actions functionality, so I'm just going to go over there and do a quick recap of this for those who haven't seen it. So if I go to, for example, the customers list, and I look in the overflow menu, then I should see this new context menu, this automate, right? So I can see in here I have the schedule a meeting flow, so I can click this one, and if I click this flow, then it should open up the Power Automate wizard, and within this wizard, I can run the Power Automate flow, right? So if I was to step through all of these steps, then it would complete this process. So we'll take a look at how one of those is implemented. So if I go to this one, I'm just going to open these tabs in the meantime. Let's give it a second to load. So the example that we're going to look at is about notifying a customer about an invoice that they need to send a reminder for. So we saw a more complicated example yesterday with the AI builder, and of course you can build more complex integrations with Power Platform, but we're just going to keep it simple for this demo. If it shows up. Okay, yeah, so the flows that Enrico showed were all based on some of our existing triggers, for example, when a record is modified or created, and those flows all run automatically, but the difference with the instant flows is that they're triggered manually by a user. So in order to get your flows to show up in the Automate menu in Business Central, then you need to use this for a selected record trigger, and in this case I've said for a selected record from this table, the sales invoice header, then what I would like to do is get some more information about this record first and foremost. So I can take some of the dynamic content from this trigger, for example, the environment ID that the customer is in and the company ID that they were in, and also the ID of the selected record, retrieve some information, and then craft an email about this using some information about that record, right? And then if I go to Business Central, select an invoice, and invoke this flow, then it will execute this flow and send an email. So just a couple of things to remember about this is that, of course, you can use the filters to limit where this is shown to a specific context. So if I want that flow to show on the sales invoice page, for example, I can use the page and table filter, or I can limit it to specific companies. So if I'm working on my flow, I can filter it to the sandbox and keep it there so that users can't see it. Right? Yeah, you prevent your users from running your flow against something unintended, like running a sales invoice flow against a warehouse or meet an invite with a document, right? And then you need to take advantage of dynamic content as well. So you can use the environment name, you can use the web client URL that we provide and the page ID to link to the context that the user was in when they executed the flow, so you can share a link to the page that the user was on. You can get some additional record information with the system ID of the selected record, and of course you can build your flows in a more generic way, as Enrico was discussing before as well, using the environment name and company ID in the first two fields. So now I'm going to talk about some new stuff in 21. So if you've used this feature and you have gone into the personalization, then maybe you've noticed that if you try to personalize an action, you see the personalization UI, but then when you go to the Automate menu, nothing shows up, right? So we've made some major improvements in this area in the next update, and now I'm just going to give a quick demonstration of the personalization stuff. So we're back in Business Central, and we're on the sales invoice page. So what I'm going to do is activate the personalization mode. And when I hover over this, you see the UI shows up on these actions. And now, when you go into the Automate menu, the designer UI shows up there too. So I can take the send a reminder flow, for example, and I can drag it to the root level of the command bar. And now, instead of being buried in the Automate menu, that flow is placed in a more prominent location that, now as a user, I have more access to this, right? And of course, if we support the personalization, then we also support customization. So I'm just going to look quickly in this posting group. Then here is a flow, this notify when posted, that I customized, and we're going to come back to this in a quick second. So just a couple of tips on this personalization. So you can take action from the automate menu and you can drop it anywhere that you can drop a standard action. So for example, in the promoted area on the right-hand side or the repository area on the left-hand side. The only place that you can't drop it is in the automate menu because this menu is generated automatically from Power Platform data. If you move an action to the repository, then it's just going to create the action at the place that you dropped it. If you move it to the promoted area, then it's going to create a base action under the actions group and then an action reference which refers to this base action. And of course, that means that if you do a lot of personalization, you're going to create a lot of base actions in the actions menu. And maybe, it's unintentional, maybe you end up with a lot of stuff that you don't want there, but don't worry, if you made a mess, then of course you can clean it up with the clear personalization or via the customization, personalization management pages. And maybe you're thinking, like promoted section, okay, I understand the word promoted, but repository action reference, what is he talking about, right? Then I have a fantastic recommendation for you in about 40 minutes. In room 5, there'll be a talk, What's New in Business Central for AL Developers by Quentin and Ego, and they'll be talking all about the new action bar model where they'll explain all of these terms, right? So don't miss that. So I was saying before, I've customized this, this action on the sales invoice, this notify when posted, right? So if I'm able to do these personalizations and customizations, then this must be represented and stored somewhere, right? So how is this stored? Well, I can export the customization and produce the little customizations file, zip folder. And in particular, I have this one, the sales invoice list configuration that I did earlier. So if you look at that file in VS Code, then you can see I have this page customization, and in the posting group, I've added this custom action object. And we'll come back to that in a quick second. And then I obviously have an action reference because I promoted this action, right? Okay, custom action. What is a custom action? We've introduced this new concept in V21, and custom action is an action which is handled by the platform, right? So you can execute an instant flow, for example. Maybe we'll introduce some more types down the line. Right now, this is the only one. You can leverage these custom actions in your IL extensions to take advantage of platform integrations. So this is what a custom action looks like and how it's built, right? Obviously, you need to say, build me a new custom action, and the implicit type is flow, right? And we infer this from the other data that you use. So, if you start writing a flow action, you don't need to write this, but it's important to know that it's there. And then the main thing that we need to put is the flow ID, right? So we need to tell the platform which Power Automate flow it should run, and it's represented by a GUID, which you can get from Power Platform itself. And we can stop there if we want. This is the minimal custom action. This is all you need to start running your Power Automate flows from AL actions. But of course, there's more flexibility with the system that you would want to take advantage of. So if you're in a situation where you have multiple Power Platform environments, then you can specify the Power Platform environment ID of the flow, and then you can have flow actions which run from different environments. But in most cases, like if you only have one environment you want to target, then you can just omit that as an optional parameter. And then you can set a default caption, right? So the flows may not necessarily be accessible to all of your users, so you can provide a default caption in case we can't retrieve the data or that flow is not available to the user at the moment. You can set dynamic visible and enable properties to determine whether the action is going to show up. And of course, you can set things like a shortcut key, like standard action properties. So how does it work, right? With the standard action object, it produces some UI in the platform, and then when you user clicks this UI, then we call back into your on-action trigger in AL, right? But I mean, you can't write any AL to trigger these Power Automate flows manually, so what we do instead is we have these custom actions, and they produce this UI in the platform, and we merge the metadata from AL with the properties from Power Platform. So for example, the caption and whether the flow is enabled, and we'll tie all that together and produce an action for you. And then when the user clicks it, we invoke that directly in Power Platform. So there's no need for you to write any AL code to implement the behavior. All you need to do is tell us which flow to run, and then we will take care of the rest. So where can you add these custom actions? Of course, you can add them in pages and also in page extensions. And in any place that you can add a custom action, you can add a reference to it so that you can have copies of that action, particularly in the promoted section. So just one tip here, the caption property will be overridden with data from Power Automate, so the caption of your flow is what will show in Business Central. But the caption will be shown when the flow isn't available, for example, if that particular user doesn't have access to the flow. So make sure that you define something so that it doesn't show the control name. And since the actions rely on Power Automate, and also the users have a couple of options as to how they can access this feature, it's possible that the user won't have access to a particular action. So it's important to know whether the action is going to be disabled and remain in the UI, or we're going to hide it entirely, right? So the action will be disabled if you set the enable property to default, enable property to false, of course. But if the user does not have access to the flow, it'll also be disabled. If the trigger filters exclude the flow from this page, you put an action on the wrong page, it'll be disabled. Or if the flow is turned off in Power Automate altogether, then we'll also disable it there too. And the action will be hidden entirely if you set visible to false. If you've hidden it via the in-client designer, so you cross out the action to move it around, but also to hide it. The user or admin has disagreed with the privacy notice, or if the user doesn't have permissions to access this feature, and we'll just come back to this at the end of the demo. So now you're thinking, if I can write these custom actions, how do I tie this into my AL extension? How do I ship this via app source, right? It's all good being able to customize this on an individual tenant, but how do I deliver this at scale? So you need to produce two parts to this, right? Normally what you would do is you take your AL extension and ship it via app source, but now you can also put together a Power Platform solution containing things like Power Automate flows and connectors to enable those flows, package those into a solution, and you need to ship both of those. So the first thing you would do is develop this Power Platform solution, and then you can export that solution into a zip file which contains some information about the objects in this solution. So then you look inside the solution, inspect it, and find the IDs of your flows to reference, and now you can start writing custom actions that refer to those flows. So then you publish to app source, and the customer installs your extension, and then separately you also need to deliver the Power Platform solution to the customer's environment. So this is like a nice diagram of how this works, but it would be good to see in action how that looks, right? So we know where to find all of these things. So I'm going to do a quick demo of this where I walk through just producing a small solution and a small extension. So if I go back to the browser, then the first thing that I want to point out is on the left-hand side in Power Automate, you see the solutions at the bottom, right? So this is where all of this Power Automate solution stuff is going to happen. So here I have my list of solutions, and this My Business Central solution is the one that I created for this demo. So if I look inside this one, I can see that I have a bunch of different flows. For example, I have this notify when posted and also schedule a meeting. And then what I want to do now is I want to export this and produce this zip file, right? So if I take one step up to the overview of this solution, then I have this export action. And if I click this, then after some time, Power Platform is going to provide me a link to download the zip file for this. But I prepared this earlier, so we'll just skip ahead for time. If I go back to this folder, then look inside the Power Platform solution, this is the output, right? So there's a lot of metadata here about the solution and the caption and ID and things like that. But what you really want to look at to build your AL extension is this customizations.xml. So if I look in this file, then I can see that I have an XML object for every flow that I'm looking at. So for example, I have this one workflow here, this schedule a meeting, and I have this workflow ID. And this is the one that I need to use to refer to this Power Automate flow. So I'm just going to copy this, and now I'm going to start writing my AL extension. So what I can do is I can write a page extension, and what I want to do is add a custom action into the processing area, just into the actions menu. So now I'm going to write a custom action, and I need to give it a name, so we'll call it schedule meeting. And then we need to give it a default caption, so we'll say schedule meeting. And now I need to type in the flow ID. So if I publish this, then I would get an action in the actions menu, which runs this Power Automate flow, right? But it would be nice if I promoted this as well. So maybe what I should do is add a action reference and point it to this action. So we'll say schedule meeting promoted, and then point that to this schedule meeting. So this is it. It's as simple as that. I just need to take the IDs from the solution and put them into the AL extension. So if I publish this, and again, we'll skip that just to cut down some time here, and I take a look at the customers list, then you can see that the scheduler meeting has been added to the promoted area, and then if I look inside the actions menu, and because it was promoted, it's been put into this little overflow menu here, I also have the base action that it refers to, scheduler meeting. And now if I click this, oh, hang on. I think I clicked it too fast. Okay. Yeah, so if I click this action, then it's going to run the Power Automate wizard, and you can see that it's running the scheduler meeting flow from the solution. So yeah, just one particular tip for distributing via app source is that you can leave this flow environment ID blank, right? So if you're building these things in your own environment, then you're probably going to start hard-coding things like the environment ID and the flow ID, but that would point the flow to your own environment. So if you leave this blank, then the client's going to search for the flow in the user's environment. So once you've imported the solution to their environment, we'll search there instead using the particular flow ID in the default environment. Last thing that I want to talk about is privacy and permissions. So As of V21, this feature is now generally available, and that means that we have removed the feature key, and as a result of that, the feature is enabled for all tenants, right? The users now need to agree to a privacy notice to use this feature, but you can get started much quicker if the admin goes in and accepts on behalf of all the users. And I'll just quickly show this too. So if I head to a new company that I created, I have this My Company. This is a company where I've never used this Power Automate feature before, right? So I'm a brand new user to this, and you can see the extension that I published before. This action is disabled because I haven't accepted the notice yet. So if I look inside the Automate menu, there's some new UI, this Get Started with Power Automate. We don't make any requests to get your flows at this point. We just show you this, and if I'm intrigued by this feature, so I'm going to click this, and now I'm presented with a nice little marketing page with some information about this Power Automate feature, and if I click Next, then I'll be prompted with the option to agree or disagree to this privacy notice. And we built this in the same way that any partner could. You can just hook into the privacy notice module and provide a custom wizard. We just did the same thing. So the other thing is that we've added a new permission, this Allow Action Automate. So if you assign this permission to users, then they will be able to use the Power Automate feature. The UI will show up. If you remove this permission, then the UI will be hidden for them. So you can hide the menu for people that aren't supposed to be able to run in these flows to avoid the clutter in the UI. But you should remember that this doesn't prevent the user from running any flows. It just prevents the UI from showing up. In Business Central, if you want to prevent the user from running the flows, you need to use like roles in Power Platform. So if you want to opt out of this feature, then the users can, of course, move or hide the actions via personalization or decline the privacy notice. The developers can use customization to move actions or hide them, or you can write AL code and hide them via page extensions. And administrators can assign permissions to remove the feature for particular users or decline the privacy notice on behalf of everyone to disable it globally. So just a quick summary, Power Automate Actions are GA, so you can build these powerful integrations like we saw at the keynote yesterday without writing a single line of code. We now support personalization, customization in the designer, so you can make these actions more prominent for your users to access, and of course you can write these in your own app source extensions using custom actions. And now we've provided some new methods for you to opt out. I think we're sort of running very short on time.
No, we're actually out of time.
Okay.
So thank you all for listening, and me, Ayrton, and Onat, Georgie, and Lukasz are going to be here. So if you want to ask any question, please come down here and find us. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.